Good morning and welcome to the Propeller Club of Northern California. I'm Stas Margaronis, and our subject today is cybersecurity. We will be welcoming Captain Taylor Lam, Sector San Francisco Commander and Captain of the Port of San Francisco. He will be assisted by Commander Boris Montatsky, who is out of the Coast Guard headquarters in Washington, D.C. We will be discussing cybersecurity and the cybersecurity threats to the maritime industry and how the Coast Guard, the U.S. Coast Guard, is addressing that. And as is our subject, as most of you know who have been on these calls, we start by introducing our participants so that everybody knows who everybody is. And then we will take it from there. And I usually start off by introducing my close comrade in arms, Todd Crawshaw.
Hi, Todd Crawshaw. Crawshaw Design. We provide integrated brand marketing for print and web, website hosting, and IT support.
Very good. Thank you, Todd. Bill Nixon. Good morning, Mr. Bill.
Good morning, Stas. Thank you for having me. This is Bill Nixon, tramp, ship agent, and board member of the Marine Exchange.
Thank you very much, Bill. I have somebody called Chris M. Can they identify themselves?
Hello there. Yes, I'm Chris Moore from Storm Geo, presently working as a route analyst for the shipping side of things, and now heading up our cybersecurity auditing team for the company.
Chris, welcome and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Commissioner Stan Mopin. Commissioner, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for hosting this and having me on.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner, Port of Redwood City and former fire chief. And we were at the Port of Redwood City's emergency practice 2 weeks ago, and Commissioner Mopin explained to me the importance of drones and how they help in firefighting. So welcome again, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Allison Fitzpatrick.
Hi, I'm Allison Fitzpatrick. I'm an end of voyage analyst at Storm Geo. I am a part of Chris's cybersecurity audit team.
Very good. Allison, welcome. And I see my good friend, Brandon Jose. Brandon, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here. It's good to be here again.
Brandon, tell us who you are.
I'm a former student at California Maritime Academy, and during my time as a cadet, I assisted Stas, and it's been a good time. Since then, I've taken a part in IT, and I work in cybersecurity at the Naval Warfare Center here in San Diego.
Very good. Thank you very much, Brandon. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Captain Ann McIntyre. Captain, good morning.
Good morning. How is everybody? Ann McIntyre with the San Francisco Bar Pilots.
And we have breakfast Thursday morning.
We do.
Okay. Welcome, Captain Ann.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. Captain Lam, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hey, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for the opportunity to be with you. Captain Taylor Lam, Sector Commander or Captain of the Port for the region here, and could not be more excited to have this conversation. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Captain. Chris Hicks.
Hi, I'm Chris Hicks, Director of IT with the Marine Exchange here in San Francisco. That's about it.
And are you seeing a lot of action in your neck of the woods, Chris?
Well, we've always seen a lot of attacks because of the name of our business, I think, just throughout the years. So we've always had to have a hardened network. Marine Exchange, people think it's a money exchange. And so they've always gone after our network for a very long time.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much for that, Chris. Commander Boris, good morning.
Good morning, Stas. Good morning, everyone. My name is Commander Boris Montatsky with Coast Guard Cyber Command and the Cyber Effects and Protection Division in Coast Guard headquarters.
Very good. Thank you very much. Darren Shems. Darren, good morning.
Hello, everyone. Darren Shems with Storm Geo. I am a senior route analyst, but also the internal audit leader. So I manage the audit teams for quality, environmental, and cybersecurity. So this is near and dear to my heart. Looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Dennis Dysinger, you made it.
Yeah, sorry, I was late to sign up there, Stas. Sorry about that. I had it on my calendar. Dennis Dysinger, formerly with Mare Island Dry Dock, now currently hanging out my shingle right now, doing some consulting. Want to give a shout out to the Coast Guard and Captain Lam on behalf of my my former employer, Mare Island. They got the Healy coming in later this year, and then they'll Polar Star next year. So there's a lot of ship repair work going on with the Coast Guard here in the Bay Area, which I think is great.
Very good. Thank you very much. Christine Zortman, good morning.
Morning, Stas. Thank you. Good morning, Captain Lam. It's Christine Zortman, Executive Director with the Port of Redwood City. Nice to be here.
Thank you very much, Christine. And thank you for inviting me to watch that shootout at the OK Corral 2 weeks ago. Justin Brown.
Yes, good morning. Justin Brown with the Pacer Group. I help oversee our cybersecurity practices and implementation at our MTSA facilities.
Justin, thank you very much and welcome.
Thank you.
My good friend from Texas, John Hark. John, good morning.
Good morning, guys. Thanks for having me. I'm John Hark. I teach at Texas A&M at the Maritime Academy in Galveston, and I'm the regional director for Bertling Logistics, a German ship owner and logistics firm here in the North America region for them. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you. And Kevin Policarpo.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kevin Policarpo. I'm Stas's research assistant. I help him out with getting information to put on reports, and also help with book reviews. And recently, I've also been helping out with outreach by sending emails to specialists in fields such as geography, geology, earth science, and recently doing stuff dealing with IT security or cybersecurity.
Very good, Kevin. Thank you very much. Okay, have I missed anyone?
John Carlier came in.
Oh, John, Captain John. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, John Carlier, San Francisco Markouts. Little technical difficulties getting connected. Good morning, Captain Lam. Nice to see you.
Very good. And Captain John, there are rumors that there's going to be a Bar Pilots Christmas party this year. Can you confirm or deny this?
Yeah, it's a denial. There's not going to be a party this year. Sorry.
Oh no. Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
No, there's already a text chain with all the pilot wives. No, I deep into the disappointment there. I got it from my wife saying, "What do you mean there's no Christmas party?" So yeah, but it's not happening. We're holding ground here. So.
Okay, Captain, thank you very much. Okay, so I want to introduce Captain Taylor Lam. He is Sector San Francisco Commander, Captain of the Port. He has been with us for a year and a half. Last year, he took us out on a really excellent Fleet Week presentation. We were in a really great place. Captain Lam has been everywhere. He has been very supportive of a lot of our maritime activities. We see him at the trade facilitation meetings, obviously at the San Francisco Marine Exchange Harbor Safety meetings. Captain Lam, thank you for being with us and good morning.
Hey, thanks, Stas, for that very gracious invitation and just kind of opening remarks. Really excited to be here with you. And let me just say at the outset, really could not be more humbled and pleased with all the different interagency and industry partnerships here across the Bay Area and the region. What I'd like to do briefly is really just give you a sense of what we are seeing at the Sector San Francisco Captain of Port level as it relates to cybersecurity concerns within the marine transportation system. We're seeing things kind of at the deck plate level, and I'm really excited to have Commander Montatsky here from Coast Guard Cyber Command. He'll be able to give you really kind of the strategic organizational level view from big Coast Guard, working hand in hand with DHS as well as DoD, US Cyber Command, and the like. So really fascinating to hear his perspective here shortly. I'll go ahead and state the obvious and say that over the last 2+3 years or so, we've all seen, I think the general public as well, seen how inextricably linked the marine transportation system is to our national security, homeland security, and obviously economic prosperity interests. I think those folks that have been in the maritime industry for several decades, you'll recall that since post 9/11 era and the Maritime Transportation Security Act of 2002, the Coast Guard has really worked, I think, diligently over the last several decades to develop this prevention and response framework, if you will, especially as it relates to physical or kinetic threats to the marine transportation system. And, we've seen that in a number of different ways, right? In terms of the legislation, specifically with respect to MITSA regulated facilities, commercial vessels, having to adhere to certain vessel or facility security plan requirements, in addition to a myriad of other elements that are part of that legislation. And you'll also probably recall that years later in 2015, Big Coast Guard said, hey, look, we are making a formal declaration here that beyond the domains of sea, air, and land, we are now entering the domain of cyber space to operate in that domain to manage and mitigate risks to the marine transportation system. And I have to tell you, I could not be more pleased at how significantly we have made advances, I think, in the Coast Guard with respect to cybersecurity, though I'm going to steal Commander Montatsky's thunder a little bit and say, we're probably not where we need to be yet, but we've certainly made significant advances and strides to where we need to go. With that said, before I push to Commander Montatsky, I just wanted to outline a couple of thoughts here from the Captain of the Port, the Federal Maritime Security Coordinator perspective, in terms of what we're doing to try to enhance the MTS's security resiliency posture. Those folks are probably familiar with our port safety and security inspectors that will periodically visit commercial facilities that are MITSA regulated to check their facility security plans. And of course, more recently, ensure that they have either a cyber annex or certain cybersecurity elements enclosed within that facility security plan. And let's be very blunt, right? I think how I would characterize it is we're looking for basic cyber hygiene and to see whether or not those elements are addressed. We're still encouraging industry to leverage the National Institutes of Standards and Technology, or NIST, or the like, to develop those facility security plans. But that's certainly one element. And then from a vessel security plan standpoint, our marine inspectors, as you know, and our port state control officers are, again, at a very basic level, just assessing to what degree basic cyber hygiene is being adhered to on those vessels that have a safety management system in place and should be addressing those basic elements. What we're doing to try to train our workforce and kind of enhance our cyber literacy to be better educated formally in terms of what to look for, we're doing a couple different things, right? So we are very much in the throes of hiring marine transportation system cybersecurity specialists at each of the 37 sector commands across the nation, including here in San Francisco. We are actively hiring or have recently hired those folks that can kind of serve as the translator, if you will, between our vessel inspectors, facility inspectors, security inspectors, and what that means from a cybersecurity standpoint. To that end, we're also continuing to have more MTS cyber specialists being hired at the Coast Guard District. That's the 2-star Admiral regional level, as well as the Pacific area and Atlantic area levels, as well as, of course, big Coast Guard headquarters in DC. Secondly, we're continuing to have our inspectors attend various sources of training to get a lot more smarter, more educated on what they should be looking for and what the latest trends are. So we have partnerships with institutions like the Stevens Institute of Technology. We've had a number of our inspectors go through that course just to get a baseline understanding, maybe a little bit more in depth on what to be looking for and to be mindful of as they visit these commercial vessels and these commercial facilities. And then as Stas and others on this line know well, in the Area Maritime Security Committee or AMSC forum, from the Federal Maritime Security Coordinator capacity or standpoint, we, as well as all of our other sector commander, captain of port colleagues, are continuing to try to promote greater awareness and utilization of cybersecurity resources across the local, state, federal, and industry level. And you all have seen that in one form or another, I would gather, whether that's additional tabletop exercises in terms of cybersecurity issues, informational seminars, and certainly with this most recent round of FEMA-sponsored port security grants, where there was clearly a nexus and a focus on enhancing cybersecurity postures. Those are all different avenues that we're continuing to try to leverage to bolster our security posture. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that our Coast Guard intelligence staffs, as part of the U.S. intelligence community, are continuing to share information not only with industry, but certainly across the interagency intelligence spectrum. So as you might imagine, we are talking frequently with our partners at DHS, Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, or DHS CISA, FBI Cyber, and as well here in the state of California, some of the state cyber specialists across the region as well, to share information, to talk about the latest trends in terms of what we're seeing and what we're hearing about. And of course, we continue to leverage the Coast Guard Cyber Command capabilities based currently out of Washington, D.C., where they have these very dynamic, impactful cyber protection teams, or CPTs, that have thus far come out and provided support to 3 different entities within the Bay Area here to do kind of an assessment of how their security networks and postures are and what areas there are for improvement to bolster some of these potential gaps or vulnerabilities. And we're excited to note that there's going to be a 4th cyber protection team visit here, I think early mid-November, I believe, to the Bay Area yet again. And we're going to continue to leverage that CPT resource, not only for the pre-incident possibilities to harden our security posture, but certainly if we have an incident or an attack or a hack, if you will, certainly the CPT is a valuable resource to respond. And so with that said, let me transition to Commander Montatsky. Again, super educated, super experienced member of the Coast Guard Cyber Command team in DC. He is, I think, at the pointing end of the spear, if you will, organizationally, in terms of what is happening at the strategic level, both within the DHS, as well as with our DoD and interagency partners, and of course with our industry partners as well. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce Commander Boris Montatsky. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain, and good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, at least for me, but morning for you all. So thank you for that wonderful introduction. I have a set of slides, but I'm not necessarily married to them. So if you have a question, please feel free to raise it, or we can wait to the end. So with that, if we could push the first slide, Mr. Crawshaw.
Sure.
Okay. Okay. Next slide. So again, Boris Montatsky, Coast Guard. When we think about the Coast Guard, obviously we always talk about the 11 statutory missions, but more importantly, as we roll them up, what are we here for? Maritime safety, maritime security, maritime stewardship, I think are the 3 main objectives when you take up all the services that the Coast Guard provides to the American public, to the American taxpayer, and to the nation. Next slide, please. So when we look at the maritime environment, we often use the word MTS, the Maritime Transportation System, but broadly speaking, the maritime environment represents our national security, represents our economic security. The United States is a maritime nation. 90% of imports and exports go through U.S. ports. 23 million jobs are sustained by the system. And when we really look beyond just the vessels and the ports, we really support almost, if not all, but at least 11 of the 16 critical infrastructure sectors that have been assigned to the national priorities. So when we think about defense and industrial base, when we think about flowing forces to fight our foes. When we think about the energy sector, the LNGs and the Louisiana offshore platforms down south, all of that is based on the resilience and the safety and the security of the maritime environment. And so, next slide, please. So what we ended up doing is we drafted in 2021, we drafted the Coast Guard cyber strategy. We really set out to really look to the North Star and figure out what is it that we want to do in cyberspace. And we really distilled that down to 3 main lines of effort. The first one is operate and defend our enterprise mission platform. The enterprise mission platform for the Coast Guard is all of our systems and sensors that are used to conduct Coast Guard operations. We are a member of the DoD Information Network. We have an MOA signed by both Secretary of DHS and Secretary of Defense back in 2017 that said that for the purposes of securing, operating, maintaining, defending, and protecting our cyber advantage for the Coast Guard, we are fully aligned to the Department of Defense. So on a daily, if not hourly basis, we get tasking from U.S. Cyber Command on how to respond to incidents, how to protect our systems and our sensors that deploy 365, 24 hours a day. Second one is protect the marine transportation system. Here's where we really start looking at what are we going to do in the MTS. We recognize that the MTS is at a constant risk. It's both at a risk to kinetic effect, but it's also at a very high risk to cyber effect. And we set out, part of our cyber strategy is to develop cyber capacities to Coast Guard capacities to protect the marine transportation system. The third LOE is operating through cyberspace. And this is a very lofty goal of really identifying what can we do in and through cyberspace to proactively operate in potentially red and gray cyberspace, holding our adversaries at risk on their turf, and enabling Coast Guard operations through cyberspace. And so, next slide, please. Our answer to that was we grew as a command. Coast Guard Cyber Command about 6 years ago was about 50 persons. Today we are north of 600, and that has to do a lot with both growth, organic growth, but also understanding some of the functions and services that Coast Guard Cyber Command produces for its service and reallocating those resources to do that. So I'll kind of orient you on this chart. So we have my boss's boss is Commander Coast Guard Cyber Command, Admiral Van. He's a 1-star admiral who just reported aboard a few months ago, and he took over for Admiral Ryan, who was the previous cyber commander. At the top, we have 2 main detachments. One of our main detachments is about 30 personnel assigned to U.S. Cyber Command. They support the U.S. Cybercom mission. They are spread out throughout the command in respective operations and planning shops, as well as the intelligence divisions. Also, we have about a 12-person detachment that is stationed at CISA, so the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency. That's a mouthful, but we just call it CISA for short, right here in Washington, D.C. These folks are purely detailees supporting the CISA mission. Although they may wear Coast Guard blue, they operate under the operational control and tactical control of CISA. You can't have a command without intelligence, and so we heavily rely on the intelligence department to tip and cue my operations to help me in prioritizing where our resources are going to go. The operations department is the largest department within CG Cyber, and that red box is exactly my division. So I am the division chief of the Cyber Effects and Protection Division. So under my charge, I have 3 cyber protection teams, 2 of them on the East Coast, and the third one, as Captain mentioned, is built out in Alameda. We also have the Maritime Cyber Readiness branch. We'll talk a little bit more about what that branch does, but really that branch is my conduit to both the captain of the ports and to the industry on cases involving cybersecurity incidents, as well as really understanding what the landscape looks like. Lastly, I have a cyber mission team that conducts offensive operations in support of DoD and DHS priorities. That team right now is being built out with a focus towards participating in the Cyber National Mission Force with U.S. Cyber Command. We also have our future operations and current operations that orient really the cyber forces to protect and defend, again, our LOE1, which is our Coast Guard systems and networks. Next slide, please. So a little bit of a deep dive on cyber protection teams. We're built to the DoD standard. A typical DoD and a Coast Guard CPT is 39 folks with 3 mission elements able to deploy globally. The mission set for the CPTs is assess, hunt, and incident response. Even though we're built to the DoD standard, what makes us very unique, in fact, we're the only service that does it, is we operate what I call off-DoD. We do not operate on DoD networks unless we are requested by the DoD. We built our cyber protection teams and our cyber capacities to operate off government networks in the protection and defense of the marine transportation system. And as Captain mentioned, we have global operations going on daily where we deploy the cyber protection teams to conduct something called assess, hunt, and incident response. So what is an assess? Assess is, the old adage of an ounce of prevention beats a pound of response. So our assess teams conduct typically a 2-week, we call in the business a penetration test. We look at the external side of a network or a system, and we attempt to exploit its vulnerabilities to better understand what's the attack surface look like. Then we conduct something in internal, so where we try to emulate kind of an insider threat, or once the adversary is in the network, how can that adversary move within the network to hold either data at risk or deny the ability of the network to provide functions to its business. A hunt mission is really more about what is that intelligence that we have, some classified, some unclassified, to orient us on indications of compromise. Once we can, now that we know that potentially an adversary is in the network, we go in quietly looking for abnormal activity to better understand what the techniques that the adversary is using, and we can identify it. This is kind of in cyberspace, this is kind of hand-to-hand combat where we really hunt the adversary and really try to kick him or her out of the network. Incident response is really at the heart of what the Coast Guard does all the time, right? We are first responders. And so when you pick up the phone and you have a cyber incident, we deploy and we assist your port partners or vessel companies on understanding what the incident is, classifying it as such, helping you identify what you can do to remediate and harden that network again. We also have a lot of our touch points with both the FBI and CISA to help us understand, is there besides that one company that experienced a cyber incident, are there any other companies that are currently experiencing the same either adversarial activity or the same vulnerability emulation? Information sharing in this particular scenario is incredibly important, and we heavily rely on both industry and government partners and the intelligence community to help us better understand. I will say that we are generally not in the attribution business, meaning my purpose isn't to find the Chinese, the Russian, the bad guy, the hacktivist, or my purpose is to reestablish the security and the resiliency of that particular system and network and let the American business continue. Next slide. So I kind of mentioned a little bit of the Maritime Cyber Readiness Branch. They take in all the incidents that occur. So for those on the VTC, you're aware that part of being in this business. When an incident occurs, you have to call the National Response Center. And under the National Response Center regime, there is a cyber notification. Those cyber notifications land in the MCRB's and the Maritime Cyber Readiness Branch's lap. Our job then is to reach out to the local captain of the port and that the MTS cyber specialist to better understand what the incident looks like. If it's an incident that occurs maybe just locally, we obviously help the captain of the port and better understand what the risk environment looks like and reestablish a better understanding of what the impact is. Now, but if the incident could be a company that is nationally spread out, or could be an international company, we would likely post something called a marine cyber alert. So a maritime cyber alert essentially is our way of putting out to the industry, hey, we are seeing this kind of trend or this particular adversary targeting this particular business. And we've had a couple of MCAs that we pushed out in the last year. The links are available on this page. I think we'll share this with you so you can click on it. But this is open to the public. So our MCAs are TLP white or TLP clear is the new term. So if you want to see it, please feel free to do that. Secondly, we published something called the Maritime Cyber Trends and Insights Report, and that is our findings of what we discovered in the last year of Coast Guard cyber operations in the marine transportation system. So the CTIME report, again, Cyber Trends Insights report, is available also on this MCRB's website, and I encourage you all to visit that. Some of the things I'm going to be talking about are excerpts from that report, but the more detailed version is available for you online. Next slide, please. Okay, so when we talk about threat actors, right? The arrow on the left, obviously, the sophistication will always go up with nation states. It's hard to compete with nation states. Cyberspace is used as a form of competition, not active hostility. And so you have a lot of that space. Attribution is extremely difficult. So this is kind of not exactly representative of reality sometimes. Sometimes you may have nation states pretending to be cyber criminals or hacktivists, or you may have terrorist groups who buy very sophisticated malware that emulate nation state TTPs. But generally speaking, this is a pretty good overview of how we obviously look at. So the cyber threat actors on the left and kind of what their motivation and what kind of vulnerabilities they're pursuing. So hacktivists are very ideologically driven. They may target companies or facilities that have something to do with petrochemicals or etc. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so the MTS attack surface, it's global interconnections. You know, a business or a company in the U.S. is just the nature of the business is an international company. What happens overseas will translate to impact on our national shores. Also in the MTS, this is where old meets new, where you have aging technology meeting new technology, and a lot of times new technology or new services are bolted onto the old. This creates a mishmash of systems, of operating systems, or especially in the vessel environment. Additionally, it's very intermodal. So you have ships, you have cranes, you have railroads, you have trucks. There's a lot of seams that an adversary could take advantage of because of its intermodal nature. And lastly, the public-private partnership. You know, a company obviously is driven by profit. And so the amount of cybersecurity that a company can levy on itself is really driven by its risk calculus. From a public standpoint, obviously we want to spend obviously our budgets are much different, and therefore it can result in, again, in those seams that an adversary can take advantage when it comes to finding vulnerabilities in the cyber space. Next slide. Okay, so we've seen an incredible rise of ransomware. Mostly criminals use ransomware, even though and typically the attack vector is like a phishing email. Nation states, on the other hand, they're using a lot of 0 days. They have the ability to develop their own 0-day vulnerabilities. And a 0-day vulnerability is something that really does not have a mitigating or mitigator available. So when we later on, we talk about patching a system and keeping a system updated through patches, those 0 days, there is no patch for it. So really, we talk about something called defense in depth that allows us to not necessarily address that particular 0 day, but makes it much more harder for the adversary to take advantage of that 0 day. Obviously, we mentioned phishing attacks. Is the preferred choice the attack vector? Again, simply because our weakest link sometimes is the human being clicking the mouse. So I can find vulnerabilities in a system, and a system can be quickly patched and updated, but getting that cyber hygiene at the individual, at the organizational level is very difficult because you're relying on human beings to be your line of defense. Operational technology continuously presents a high risk simply because we may not know the full extent of that vulnerability. When operational technology, the joke goes, if you've seen one, you've seen one. They're very specific. They're very expensive services and systems that perform a very specific function. When operational technology meets information technology, again, that seams can be exploited, and we want to be as careful as we can when we connect operational technology to our regular business IT systems. PNT, position, navigation, timing, although not a cyber attack surface, it manifests itself a lot of times through technology. So GPS spoofing or NAIS is a risk that we continue to track. Okay, next slide, please. So going back to that insight report that I talked about that we published in 21, here you see a map of all the incidents that we've seen that was reported to the Coast Guard and how we responded. Broadly speaking, we characterize most weaknesses across 3 areas. One is access control and authentication. Second one is something called least privilege. And don't worry, I know these these are sometimes technical terms, but I'll explain really what that means, and it'll make very clear sense to you. And the third one is system maintenance. In 21, we saw a 68% increase in number of reported MTS cyber incidents. I don't think necessarily that the number of incidents increased. It's the number that been reported that as your defenses go up, as your awareness in cybersecurity goes up, you are more encouraged to report that to the Coast Guard. And that helps us better understand what that attack surface looks like and really understand what the risk posture of the MTS as a whole looks like. So I really do encourage that when you have any suspicious activity or you experience any kind of anomalies on your systems, go ahead, pick up the phone and call the MTS cyber specialist at your local captain of the port and report it to them. It could be a nothing burger, but it could be something, a good indicator for us as well. Next slide. Okay, so access control and authentication. This is the old, username and password. You would be surprised. Now, I got these statistics from the report that we published, CTIME report. The most common password is password, or the most common username is user. 99% of the time, if we institute something called multi-factor authentication, this will counter this particular vulnerability. And this is a biggie. You would be shocked at how many times we see system administrators or people with privileged access using default passwords and usernames that came with the device, like a router or a firewall or a switch. But multi-factor authentication is one thing that a company can do, that can institute to really prevent that specific vector of attack. Next slide. Next one, we kind of talk, broadly speaking, about least privilege. Basically, just like you have least privilege on a ship, just like you have least privilege in a port, it's providing the least amount of access to an individual to do their job. A lot of times we see elevated service accounts. So, if you're the IT guy in this virtual room that I'm talking to, if you have elevated service accounts, using them for daily functions of your job that are not necessarily for admin privilege is a big no-no. We know that, right? But in a small company, if you have a computer on your desk, you probably have administrative rights, which means you can install and uninstall software. You can change some settings. Having that elevated service account that you use on a daily basis for regular functions increases your chance of an adversary getting in and essentially owning your system or your computer. Again, talking about that non-essential use of elevated accounts is a giant red flag in any of our assessed missions. An open mail relay, we have, like, I have a Google account, I have a Yahoo account. Trust me, I get a lot of spam. That's because they have open mail relays, which means I can get an email from pretty much anyone, and no filter can stop it. But I can spot it. These guys are getting very sophisticated in in those phishing emails. I have gotten some doozy emails from Amazon. I think my Amazon account's been locked out pretty much every day for the last year and a half at the rate that I get these emails. But if you have an open mail relay, understand that you're going to get a lot of phishing emails. And when you get those phishing emails, you have to have a process and a policy for your users to teach them, to train them to spot the sort of the fake email. I will say, in our assess mission, part of our portfolio of the services we do, we launch a phishing campaign to really test what the click rate looks like of your end users. And some that practice, that constantly practice that being guarded are pretty good. The 1 hour a year of cyber awareness challenge or cyber awareness training probably doesn't do it well. I encourage for some program administrators or cybersecurity administrators to really think about how to train your users on phishing emails. Next. And lastly, this is system maintenance. This is very much in the bailiwick that is your IT provider. So Windows 7 or archaic or old IT or operating systems are just horrendous, and they are very porous to cybersecurity. A lot of times, some of these systems have not been supported by the vendor for years, and so as the risk goes up, as the adversary goes up, as the vulnerabilities go up, these systems aren't keeping up with the pace of that, and they become a lot more vulnerable. Some stats on the right here: 60% of victims said that they were breached due to systems that were unpatched. So next time you're on your computer or you see a pop-up says, "Hey, there's patches available," go ahead and click that. It's worth it for sure to keep yourself personally and your business protected. All right, one more slide. So we talk about this operational technology. The main point I want to leave is network segmentation. The crane should never be open to the internet. The pump station should never be open to the internet. So as many times, whether you can logically or physically segment your network away from the public internet, the better. And here is a quick example of like a typical terminal operating system. And what you see is these brick walls. Those are firewalls that allow that blocking and tackling of malicious code at every point. And you can see something I talked about, which is defense in depth. You know, you have the customer portal, then you have another firewall, another essentially gate that needs to go through. Just like you do in the physical realm, so too in cyberspace. Okay, one more. So we talked about PNT. This is kind of an example. This happened in, I believe, 2017. It was a French flag oil chemical tanker reporting a GPS anomaly in the Black Sea. I can only imagine which country was responsible for this particular one, but things like that are very important to alert the Coast Guard on, alert the local area on, specifically the captain of the port, because it's really important to understand if there are GPS anomalies and it's a targeted anomaly or it's a targeted attack, that we report that immediately. Unfortunately, at this point, it's very difficult for us to counter or defend against this, but we just want to be have folks aware that the threat is out there. I think with that, I stand by for questions or comments, and I really thank you for your time.
Commander, thank you very much for that. I see Darren there, and I'm going to have him come in just a second. The anomalies, we have seen spoofing reported on a number of occasions in which vessels were making approaches to ports around the world. There was an incident where a ship, a US flag vessel, was headed to port at an Asian port, and its GPS system went haywire. They did not know what to do, and the ship was in danger. What is the advice to the master and the officers if they're getting spoofed?
That's a great question. I will defer it to the captain of the port in the room. Over.
Yeah, hey, Stas, I think you and I have talked about maybe this particular incident before, and honestly, I don't remember the exact specifics, but I would say that if such a scenario were to occur here, right off the coast of Northern California, I think obviously the port pilots, the Captain McIntyres and the Captain Carliers of the world, certainly would be asking them, you know, depending on where this occurs and when it occurs, especially if we're talking about an inbound or outbound transit, you know, what's the best course of action? So, you know, are they coming at the pilot pickup point offshore? Maybe you remain offshore until we figure out what is happening here. If you're in the bay, you know, does that mean head to Anchorage 9 and drop the hook and let's reassess where we are? So I think that hypothetical situation, my general inclination would be, hey, you know, bar pilot, what's your assessment given the weather, visibility, environmental conditions on what you think we ought to do here? So I know that may not answer it directly, but that's just initial thoughts.
Thank you very much. Darren Shems.
Hello. So I'd like to kind of field one of the elephants in the room with regard to cybersecurity, that being TikTok. It just came to mind, and I had another read over their policy. I consider myself non-biased because I don't use the app. Maybe that makes me biased in a way, but in the same vein, when we're talking about penetration tests and the viability of doing that via a third party simulating usage from an app like that. And for those of us seeking certification in 27001, I'm wondering in good conscience if we can allow employees to use that app at all on personal or company hardware that can obviously exploit the data access, especially where we don't have necessarily full tunnel systems. Because when we think about it with cell phones in particular, it's not like the early 2000s where people constantly get issued company cell phones. So even if we have segmented systems, there could be data access that way once they use that phone. that might be old and not have updated security protection. Because we have in writing on their privacy statement here that they may associate us with information collected from devices other than those that you use to log into the platform. And they come right out and say they may not collect biometrics, they may not collect keystrokes, but they say in the policy that they have the ability to do just that, and they collect more user data than any other app. So I just want to field to the group whether or not this seems like a viable stance in lieu of cybersecurity to just have company policy flat out. We can't allow any devices, private or company, to have that app installed in lieu of a federal ban.
Tough question. Commander?
Well, so again, in my limited experience, telling somebody complete no, people are always going to find a way. So having a written policy without the ability to really enforce it on a BYOD device is just it's gonna be very challenging. I'd like to say it's really kind of a multi-pronged approach. First and foremost, it's really educating your workforce and understanding what the risk is. It's not necessarily the risk to the company, but what is the risk to their cyber persona, to their identity of having, accessing these kind of apps like TikTok. And that, any social media app is going to collect that data, and really have them acknowledge that for every layer of convenience, there's a layer of security that gets taken off. So that's one. I think training and education is important. Two is the ability to really, and this is kind of a technological response to it, but what is your ability to monitor, if it's not a private device, but what is your ability to really monitor what data is coming in and coming out of your network? Do you have the right sensors in place to really understand that? And that could be a kind of a technological response to that. So those are my kind of initial thoughts, but you're right, this risk is out there. And who sells that data and how that data is used is, it's one of those things that does keep me up at night for sure. Over.
Is there has the Coast Guard thought about the vulnerability of cell phones and apps like TikTok and how they might be creating vulnerabilities to the larger system?
We do think about it, in that way. In this regard, the MTS is not necessarily unique. Employees will always have their phone with them. It's a tether, it's an electronic tether that all of us have anywhere we go. You can potentially institute some restrictive, spaces where cell phones aren't to be taken, or lock boxes put out. So it's convenient to put that away. I know in my daily business, my phone, I stay away from my phone because I'm in a classified environment all the time. But understanding what those secure spaces look like, I think it's up to you and obviously the captain of the port. And I know Captain Lam's got a hand.
Yeah, thanks. I don't know that this directly answers Darren's question, but just to give you a sense organizationally, as we talk about TikTok and other social media applications, everyone knows that we are, I think, perhaps in the greatest battle for, the best and the brightest in terms of a talented workforce, future workforce. With that said, we are continually asking ourselves, not just us, but other DoD military service branches, how can we better connect with the younger generation to recruit, to retain, to get potential recruiting leads? And I will tell you, we have had a lot of active conversations, I think, across the service about YouTube, about Instagram and TikTok, and certainly that's an issue of concern that we have there. And related to that, the Coast Guard for a number of years now has been undergoing what our last and current commandant have been calling as a technology revolution or tech revolution. And part of that, beyond just providing more mobile platforms for our folks for telework and other more mobile accessibility means, is to, at some point, some have opined, maybe the future desired end state is to do away with the person's personal cell phone and the Coast Guard issued cell phone or tablet. The ideal end state is one phone, perhaps your personal cell phone, that can access the Coast Guard data network. And I don't know if Commander Montatsky has more on that, but I think certainly that increases the potential risk profile, especially when you start talking about social media platforms on an employee's personal phone while they can access simultaneously the Coast Guard data network. I'll just stop there.
Yeah, this is what I call a wicked problem, because we want to obviously preserve our liberties and really balance liberties against security. And part of me absolutely wants to know what is that phone? What is that essentially surveillance piece doing as the member carries it as part of their business? And I can only imagine. I share Darren's concern as well. The other piece is, if I have access to the member's phone, there's a lot of liability that comes with that, right? And now, where do I stop from protecting the network and to really having access to their photos or having access to their their other personal conversations? And this is where again, a wicked problem. Lucky for me, we have an army of lawyers that do this as a living, and so I'll just stand by for their opinions. I'm ready to go trigger happy with the computer stuff, but I'll stand by for the lawyers to tell me where to go. Over.
Okay, Brandon Jose.
Yes, thank you. Once again, thank you for this presentation. I really enjoyed it. It's something I'm passionate about. With more than 90% of the world's trade being carried by shipping, the maritime industry is very attractive for cyber attacks. What would you say is the most common and most devastating types of attacks that occur for you guys? As for Coast Guard trying to protect the maritime industry, does it happen at the ports? Is it somewhere in the middleman while you're trading? What does it look like?
Commander?
I would say phishing as the attack vector, followed up by either ransomware or an exploitation that denies the ability for the business to function. So it's not like a network attack, like a DDoS, like a denial of service. It's really about it's either stealing the data or holding the data at risk. So the business either has to pay a ransom or stop its operations. I would say that's probably, we have seen a tremendous rise in that kind of attack. And vessels are unique. They're a unique attack surface on their own. Half the time they're completely disconnected in a degraded, contested environment. And so getting the malware onto the vessel is very difficult. That's kind of a closed access point. So I think it's IT systems that are internet facing are the easy targets. And we kind of saw that a little bit with Colonial Pipeline. So Colonial Pipeline shut down on the East Coast because the IT system was attacked and affected, and they just simply didn't know the interconnections between their IT system and their OT systems. And so they made a calculated risk decision to shut down operations for a period of time to better understand what their IT or their cyber environment looked like. And so I think that's where I'm seeing most of the attacks coming from. Over.
Okay, Dennis Dysinger.
So great presentation, Captain Lam and Commander. You made as a Cal Maritime graduate, as well as Brandon and several others on the call here, a great pitch for recruiting maritime graduates into this program. So if you could pass on some information about what you're looking for to follow in Brandon's footsteps, because he's obviously doing it for the Navy. I mentor a lot of cadets up there, and I think that the Career Center would like to know what you're looking for. Over.
Kevin, you want me to take that one?
Yeah, please do. I have follow-on comments. Go ahead, please.
Sure. So I couch it as this. Cybersecurity is constantly evolving, right? We have about a 750 to 800,000 job deficit right now. What I would look in a typical individual that wants to get into cyberspace is I would take 90% motivation and enthusiasm and 10% ability, and then vice versa. This is an evolving field. What you know today is going to change all the time. So if somebody who's generally interested in this, kind of a passionate about this, and kind of a self-learner, most of my operators on the CPT and the mission team, they are bosun mates. They are intelligence specialists. They are MSTs. They're marine safety technicians. They self-learned this through YouTube, through Discord, through finding a buddy that they learn from. And so if there's genuine passion and optimism in there, we could definitely cultivate that and make them kind of a cyber professional, as opposed to kind of pulling teeth and having the other way around. Captain.
Yeah, just really quickly, I know we're getting pressed for time, but I would simply say at a broad level, the fact that we now have a cyber mission specialist or CMS rating for our enlisted members is really exciting. So now we have formally trained folks where that's what they do. Number two is we are, as the Commandant likes to say, transforming our total workforce, meaning that if you are a civilian and you have certain cybersecurity skills, trust me when I say either through the direct commission officer or DCO program, where we lateral you in and you don't start from the bottom, you come out as maybe a lieutenant junior grade or perhaps even a lieutenant. There are those possibilities, notwithstanding the civilian Coast Guard cyber positions for cybersecurity specialists. And then of course, there's a lot of emerging conversation about if you're a civilian with a certain baseline level of cybersecurity knowledge and experience, maybe you enlist, but you don't start out at the bottom as a third class petty officer. Maybe you're a second class or first class petty officer, or even higher. So there are really a lot of emerging opportunities as far as the cyber workforce for the Coast Guard.
Thank you for that. That kind of gets my mind going as I deal with the Career Center a lot up there. And Commander, I'm just gonna say, when you've seen it once, you've seen it once. I haven't heard that before, but I'm gonna remember that.
So Brandon, you're our poster child for somebody who's made it in this path, and you got really interested in it. And I know coming out of the CMA, this was something that you didn't immediately go to, but you've developed it as a passion. And I really like the commander's description: 90% enthusiasm and 10% ability. Brandon, I'm going to let you have our closing on what you would look for if you were reaching out to your colleagues and people of your own age group, looking at a possible career in cyber. What would you advise?
I would advise that I agree that 90% motivation and 10% ability is very true. I've seen teachers, I've seen mechanics who have no background in IT take their life around and support for their families, and now they're part of cybersecurity in like a year or two. Study hard, study well, get the certifications that you need, and you can take on this path. There's job opportunities out there, whether you go DoD or the military or private sector. The world needs more cybersecurity protection, and if you want to do it, you can. And it's just a mindset. And don't let anybody tell you you can't, because you will.
Very good. John Hark, I see you nodding. I'm going to give you, since you're from Texas, and Texas is the favorite state of all Californians, I'm going to give you the last word on this one.
Yeah, thanks. Great presentation, guys. I can say at Texas A&M, we're taking this seriously. We have a maritime cybersecurity minor available now for our students. And that's through a mixture of specific cyber classes as well as some modules, for instance, in my chartering class. That's available to all our students. We now have computer science from our Department of Engineering on the Galveston campus at the Maritime campus. So, we're seeing this cybersecurity now at Texas A&M Maritime, in the Maritime Business Program, the engineering program, and of course with the marine transportation with the deck officers, right? With the guys that are and gals that are coming out as third mates. So, it's exciting times. There's a lot to be done. And I think there's a lot of good collaboration going on as well.
Very good. Thank you very much. Captain Lam, one last closing thought?
No, just really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all today. And my challenge to everyone here is to keep the conversation going and really continually assess how we can integrate and weave in the cybersecurity mindset with the more historical traditional modes of security as we have understood it over the last several decades. But really, thank you for being here and thank you for the talk.
Very good. I want to thank everybody for your participation. The Propeller Club of Northern California thanks you and thanks all of the people who are working for their companies, industry, and country at the Coast Guard, at companies, at educational institutions, and places like the Port of Redwood City. Thank you very much, Christine. We have, the Propeller Club has one last event right now, November 9th. It's the Storms, Flooding, and Sea Level Defense Conference. You can see it behind me. It has to do with the resiliency and storm surges. Gene Soroka, the executive director of the Port of Los Angeles, will be the keynote speaker, and he will be discussing U.S.-China collaboration on this subject, which, of course, on other subjects, such as the one we're here right now, we may have a different situation. But in any case, it's a day-long event. If you are interested in the subject, please send me an email and I will send you the information. I want to thank all of you for your participation. Darren and your Storm Geo colleagues, thank you very much for your support and for your input on this one. And I believe that the Propeller Club would like to continue to find a way to work with you, Captain, on doing outreach on an ongoing basis. I think that this problem is not going away and that we do need to start getting a lot more serious about this. There are a number of very complicated implications that Commander Montatsky has raised that I don't think we still fully understand. And I hadn't even thought of TikTok until Darren mentioned it, but we have a real concern about TikTok. And there's a national security concern about that. So I hope that we will get some direction from you, Captain, about where to go. The Propeller Club would be very interested in participating in any follow-up. And we would very much like to stay involved in your developments at the Coast Guard. With that, I want to thank you all for your participation again. Best wishes for the oncoming holiday season. And if we don't see you in 2022, we will see you in 2023. All of our best wishes from the Propeller Club, its board members, and thank you again for all of your support and for your service. And Captain Lam, thank you for bringing this. It took us a couple of months to get this one together. And Commander Boris, thank you very much for educating us on a very, very timely and important subject. So with that, best wishes to you all and see you next year.